everyone. Welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, the podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, and game masters. With your questers, Josh and Dan, I'm Dan.
I am Josh.
And on today's podcast, we will be discussing all things Trollical Part 3 as we get to the Crystal Raiders of the Western Twilight Peaks. So if you have any questions for us, please drop us a line at edsgpodcast@gmail.com or call and leave us a voicemail. We'll put that in the show as well. So you want to get right down to it, or you got something to say?
No, we're good to just dive right in.
Fair enough. Enough announcements. That's out of the way. So the Western Twilight Peaks, if you're looking at the map, I'm not. Let me get my map. There we go. So the Western Twilight Peaks. These are two parallel mountain ranges, the northwestern and the southwestern. So north and south of the western. Haha. This is also, running between the two of these is the Great Sword Valley, which separates them. Because, of course, between mountains, you have a valley. The fire slopes on the southern facing of the southwestern slopes run from the southwestern peaks to Death's Sea. They run straight there. So if you're looking at that, that looks, not a great place to be. These mountains are craggy and rough. They're made of dark volcanic rock. Tremors and earthquakes happen quite often. The terrain is so rough that it's nigh impassable by land. There's only a couple of little land places to get to, so they're guarded, and really, everybody who lives here knows that the only way to get there is by airship. Just one of those things. Death's Eyes are two twin volcanoes located in the southwestern range as well. This place is so dangerous in the Western Twilight Peaks that the creatures inhabit this area, aside from just the Crystal Raiders themselves. The other creatures that live there are mostly made or connected to elemental earth and elemental fire. We're talking gargoyles, fire eagles, fire wraiths, magma beasts, hellhounds, crags, mountain goats, stone lions, and brithins, just to name a few.
Yeah, and a lot of those are, especially stone lions and brithins, are often the targets of younger trolls looking to make a name for themselves in the Western Peaks, and their hides and fur are often incorporated into the clothing and armor of the warriors and sky raiders that make up these Western clans.
Yeah. So there are a few points of interest to get to about the Western Twilight Peaks before we get to the actual troll moots themselves, because all of this does set up the two troll moots who inhabit this region. The Great Sword Valley, as I mentioned before, is where numerous raider settlements have cliffs homes throughout the area. So they are literally on the side of the cliffs. Dozens of cares inhabit the Great Sword Valley, so a lot of them were built here, and there's a bunch of pre-scourge ruins. So this area is ripe for all kinds of setting for adventures and places to visit. The monuments near these ruins, I like to imagine what things look like, because this is all text. And so the movie in my mind, when I think of Earthdawn or read the books, the monuments near the pre-scourge ruins are an 8-foot crystal carved with pictures telling of the Theron treachery against the trolls and the Crystal Raiders' valiant stand against the behemoth that landed.
Well, it didn't land.
It didn't land.
The behemoth didn't land. So we talked about the behemoth. We've talked about the behemoth multiple times. But the behemoth that came in for the Battle of Skypoint that wrecked house amongst the trolls and kicked off Thera's declaration of empire and was part of the Orichalcum Wars. The behemoth first showed up at the western end of the Great Sword Valley, which is this wide valley that divides the northern range and the southern range of the Western Twilight Peaks from each other. Runs from where it starts at the western end of the peaks between those two ranges to end at
Skytoucher Mountain.
At Skytoucher Mountain. The behemoth came in and started at one end of the valley, sailed up it.
Yeah, west to east.
West to east, bombarding everything and swatting the attempts by the Crystal Raiders to go against it with their Drakars and basically just wrecking house until it arrived at Skytoucher Mountain, where it bombarded the heck out of the forebears of the current Thunder Sky Moot, the old Skytoucher Moot.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the destroyed villages along the Great Sword Valley are, like the ones on Skytoucher Mountain itself, considered sacred sites and reminders of what had happened, and have these crystal monuments erected near them. The Bloodlores especially, we'll get to them shortly, they don't go into those places themselves, and any that they find violating those sacred areas, they kill them.
Mm-hmm.
They do not put up with that. What you kind of have with the Great Sword Valley is along the northern ridge of the Great Sword Valley is where a lot of the cares and settlements and whatnot for the Bloodlores are. And on the southern side slopes of the valley is where you've got the Blackfangs, who we'll be talking about as well. And then at the far eastern end of it, you get into a little bit of Thundersky territory.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the situation there, with the valley in between providing a lot of the resources and protections and whatnot. But there are only a couple of narrow passes and accesses to the valley itself, which are closely watched.
Yeah.
It is one of the more impregnable areas when it comes to attacks from the land. And of course, attacks from the sky are an entirely different matter, which is why the behemoth was so effective when it came time for the Therans to do what they did.
Exactly. So at the end of the eastern end of the Great Sword Valley is something else of note. And that is called the Crystal Span. I read this book 25 years ago. I completely forgot this thing existed, so I was really happy to find it again. This is a multicolored, translucent living crystal arch that extends from the canyon walls on the southern to the northern ridges of Skytoucher Mountain between these two ridges. So this is an area, this is a huge crystal like bridge. It's multicolored, translucent. It's awesome. When the sunlight hits it, it like cascades rainbows like all down the valley. So it's just freaking beautiful. And then when sunset hits, it goes the other direction. So it's just one of those great setting ideas in Earth Dawn, because it's this monumental, and it's survived the Scourge. It's survived the Behemoth. It's survived earthquakes,
everything,
and lava flows. It's so far it's like impregnable, but they know that it is eventually going to go away.
Maybe. Troll legend has it that the Crystal Span is integral to the Passion's imprisoning of death.
Yes.
If either the span is ever destroyed or death escapes, the span will be destroyed. That it is critical to that. That ties into the fact that in the shadow of the Crystal Span, that area underneath it is neutral ground. It is the only place in the entire Twilight Peaks where the different moots can get together and actually meet and talk about things. Even the Bloodlores will not break the peace of that area because they believe in the stories of blood being spilled, eventually releasing death.
Yeah, on ground.
Right, on the ground. And they believe that blood that is spilled in the shadow of the arch, under this thing that is so close to death's domain and so close to one of the shackles binding it, so to speak, that blood spilled there is even more potent when it comes to that sort of thing. And so will not violate that truce.
Yeah. They treat that
which potentially, if you're looking for a large-scale threat that maybe a higher circle group might need to deal with, is you've got the Keys of Death, maybe trying to do something with regards to that to damage the span or to have blood spilled underneath it or to try and perform some kind of ritual in terms of their whole thing. Go back to our Keys of Death episode for more information on them, because their goal ultimately is to release death, this site that has such a great significance in regards to those legends would definitely be something that they would be interested in. And you've got a very dangerous and difficult area to deal with, not only because of all the native wildlife and dangerous stuff, but the various troll moots as well, who are likely to not look kindly on people messing around in that area.
Yeah, agreed. So we've covered the Great Sword Valley and the Crystal Span.
Oh, one thing I do also want to mention real quickly, just stepping back to the Great Sword Valley.
Do it.
Legend has it that the Great Sword Valley was carved by Thistonius himself in one mighty cleave of his sword.
Absolutely. You got to just love that.
Hence the Great Sword Valley that it's created.
And what it was named after, yes.
Yes.
I love the legendary epicness of that tale.
Yes.
Just, come on.
That's all.
Earthdawn and Span, man. Let's go. Yeah, no argument. Please get that in there. So on to Death's Eyes, which again, I mentioned earlier, but this is important because this is the active volcanoes in the Western Twilight Peaks. Local legends say that Death looks through them to the world. And when troll mystics are there, they see visions in the magma and the smoke and are occasionally visited by spirits as well. So these are pretty active and pretty important, I would say. Exotic living crystal grows here, and a lot of true fire can be found here as well. And by the way, like pure
and true
veins
earth
of flowing orichalcum.
And orichalcum, yeah. Very, very highly magical area in the sense that there is a lot of powerful elemental energies kind of mixing in this area, allowing orichalcum to come into natural being as a result of the earth and the fire and the titanic elemental forces that are at play here. The other bit of the legend with regards to Death's Eyes, not only does Death look through them, it is possible that either by making your way through the natural lava tubes and caverns and fissures that riddle these mountainsides around there, or possibly by going through the lava of the volcano itself, one can actually cross into Death's domain. And by entering that way, that you might be able to petition Death to release someone that it has claimed. There are a few legends in Earthdawn about how once somebody is sort of beyond the redemption of a last chance salve or similar kind of relatively short-term resurrection magics, when they are mostly dead as opposed to all dead, once they have been claimed by Death, that you need to undertake an epic quest of some sort in order to get to Death and petition them to release this spirit that they have claimed. Echoes of Hades and Orpheus and Eurydice and that sort of thing. There's a legend, The Passion's Dance, I think it's called. Is that the name of it?
Yeah.
In the first Legends book that has somebody dancing to draw the attention of Death to try and get their loved one back from Death's embrace.
Yeah.
The third Gerol novel, Poison Memories, involves Death and ties very strongly into Death's Sea. So there's kind of a lot going on there and a lot of really interesting, epic and weird and powerful magics and
the highest of high fantasy.
Incredibly powerful and mysterious beings, you know, the passions that can come into play there. Certainly a location that at a high level game would be significant in some ways for rituals or for some objective or things along those lines.
Totally. And the southern facing slope of the Twilight Peaks is pretty much inhospitable. That's where all the magma flows down as lava into the Death Sea. Not that there aren't people trying to live there that have been outcast, but it's
We'll talk about them another time.
Exactly. We'll get there. Anyway, the last one I want to point out is actually the lowland point of the Twilight of the Western Twilight Peaks, which is the Western Passes and the Three Rivers. Now, the Three Rivers are not actually rivers. That is the name of a farming and trading town, and that's where some of the troll moots raid. But it's the lowest point right next to the rivers themselves, where all three of those rivers actually meet. The Leash River, the Dolores River. I can't remember the name of the third river. Anyway, that's where they all meet.
The Valley River.
Thank you. Knew I was missing one. But this is the Western Passes themselves are patrolled by the Blackfang and Bloodlore Moots at different times because, you know, whoever wants to control them at that point is pretty much in charge. But that's just one of those, that's what the lowlands are. So if your adventuring party is going to get into the Twilight Peaks from the western side, they're pretty much going to have to stop in the western passes and the Three Rivers first.
Right. That is the only land access from Barsave to Carafod and Landis and Vivane and the areas around there.
Yeah.
Take that pass between where the Twilight Peaks come down and the Dolaris Mountains to the further east start climbing back up again.
West.
Further west, right, sorry.
Fair, no worries.
Yeah, so there's that area that certainly a lot of travel passes through. The communities there, the main one being Three Rivers, but there are some other like smaller communities and villages around there as well, are mostly trolls, but trolls that are sort of more lowlanders as opposed to being more traditional sky raiders.
Yeah.
Despite the hazard that the Western Twilight Moots pose, and the Eastern Dolaris Moots pose as well. We'll get to them another time.
Yes.
Because it is pretty much the only way to get from that southwestern corner of the province up into the rest of Barsave.
Yeah.
A lot of traffic passes through there that you are fortunate enough to slip through without attracting the attention of a raiding party, or that you have enough protections on it to fight them off.
Yeah.
During the time before the Second War, the Therans would even have caravans and supply runs that would go through this area after navigating through Carafod and then passing through here, because this was, again, the only overland route that they could take to get supplies to the Triumph, their fortress at the shores of Lake Ban. If you're looking at a pre-Second War situation, there is a lot of stuff going on, and Krathis Gran is looking at forming some kind of more formal arrangement with Three Rivers and the communities in that area to strengthen that pass, to perhaps limit Theran access to it, and just to more generally make the whole situation stronger.
Yeah. So I figured we would start off with those 4 major points of interest, geographically speaking, before we get to the actual moots themselves. And now it's time for the moots themselves. The Bloodlores, as we promised to get to all this time, are here now. This is the most savage and warlike moot that you're going to find anywhere.
I'm not crazy about the term savage. They are the most aggressive. They are the most violent. They embody the stereotype of the vicious sky raiders that is probably felt in the rest of Barsave.
Yeah.
They are the embodiment. They are the iconic, legendary representation of the bloodthirsty, violent, aggressive moots.
Yeah. I took savage straight from the book, so I agree with your point.
Yeah, I mean,
in 20 years, a better word has come to mind, and I think aggressive is probably better.
In the case of the Bloodlores, it probably is somewhat fitting.
Yeah.
But just sort of aware of the history of savage being used as a way of othering.
Yes. Good point.
Communities that are being othered by colonialist powers.
Fair enough.
Savage was a term that was very frequently wielded against the Native American tribes as justifications for the genocide that was being practiced upon them by the United States westward expansion.
Fair. Yeah.
It is a similar sort of thing that happened to the colonial situation in Africa.
And India.
And in India. And basically anywhere that European powers went to steal resources, that they are savages.
Fair.
That description in this book is not something that is being wielded by, say, Thrall, although they might.
Yeah.
They're saying they're savages and we get some kind of other view of that. But the Bloodlores are aggressive, violent,
bloodthirsty,
stereotypical, cannot be reasoned with, vicious, raiding killers.
Yeah, fair. Absolutely fair. They were formed centuries before the Scourge. So this is a long-lasting moot troll moot. They emerge from the scourge more vicious and grudge holding because of what they viewed as the other troll moots not stepping up to the plate against Thera.
Right.
And since they bore the brunt of it, along with the other ones, they really held that resentment for 400 years.
Yeah, for longer. The Bloodlores are one of the earliest moots. They were inspired by the Sky Touchers, who were the first.
Yeah.
And so the Bloodlores went, oh, that's a good idea, and decided that those who wanted to lead the moot would beat each other up, and whichever one was left standing at the end was obviously the strongest and most deserving.
Yes.
And they were actually most traditionally troll crystal raiders. It was their way of life. They raided, they did all of those things. They had that sort of very strong cultural background and were responsible significantly in their own way for drawing the Theron's attention to the Twilight Peaks. When the Orichalcum Wars kind of started off, the other troll moots scaled back a little bit in terms of their attacks on Thera, and the Bloodlores were like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to continue doing what we want to do and hit who we want to hit, and that's just the way we are. And then the Behemoth showed up and bombarded the bejesus out of the Bloodlores and the Blackfangs and eventually the Sky Touchers as it sailed along the Great Sword Valley. And then not long after that, the Scourge came.
Mm-hmm.
And during that period of time where they were sealed up in their cares, the stories got told and retold, and this sort of cultural resentment against especially the far eastern end of the peaks, the Stoneclaws
and Swiftwinds.
And the Swiftwinds, who maybe fought but did not have the destruction and damage done to them that the other moots did. And so that resentment came to be, and perpetuating that aggressive, violent, vicious nature through the centuries of the Scourge, and then coming out and continuing it. And I think in part, one of the reasons that the Bloodlores are as violent as they are right now has to do with Chorak, their chief.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, the chief, Chorak Bonecracker Bloodlore. You got to love these names. I'm just saying. You really do. He's just under 30, but will barehandedly crush opponents because he can.
Yeah.
And he thinks he should. That's the other thing right there. He is fierce, honorable, strong, and proud. Exactly what you would expect from a clan leader of a moot known as the Bloodlores, just saying. Ninth Circles, yeah.
But Crystal Raiders in general.
Yes, totally. Yeah, he's the stereotypical. But he's the Ninth Circle Sky Raider. That's how powerful he is. But he is the traditionalist. You know, basically, Crystal Raider life, ride or die.
Yeah.
For lack of a better phrase.
For all the talk we spin about the Bloodlores being violent, aggressive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true, but that is because there is a very strong traditionalist ethos.
Yeah.
The Bloodlores feel that they are the ones that are truest to the Crystal Raider way of life and the Gift of Jaspree, everything that sums up what it means to be a troll.
Yeah.
In a kind of highly conservative and orthodox approach to it.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, as a result, we talked about the Stoneclaws, right?
Yes.
That their very existence, the fact that they have dwarves among their number, they are diluting what it means to be a troll, that they are not being true to these ideals. And so Chorak hates them. The Bloodlores hate them for that. All of the other moots in some way fall short of this ideal that the Bloodlores hold. It's not because they necessarily are a bunch of psychotic, vicious killers, although in some cases they kind of are. It's that they are orthodox traditionalists to a very high degree.
Yes.
Although there are some divisions, as is the case with all of these moots.
Totally.
Which I think maybe brings us to something that we kind of skipped over, and that is the Forgiven of Jaspree.
Yes. Please elaborate. I took one quick note to get the rest of this down.
Yeah, the Forgiven of Jaspree are a secret society, a living legend cult that believes that the so-called Gift of Jaspree that a lot of the Sky Raider troll moots, the Crystal Raiders, follow. The idea that, yes, life is harsh up here and Jaspree made it that way, but it was a gift because that makes us strong.
Yes.
And we need to fight for our existence, and this is the way that it is. The Forgiven of Jaspree are like, maybe it isn't. Maybe it was actually a curse and we have been lying to ourselves all this time.
Yes.
Maybe we don't have to live this hardscrabble existence where we're raiding merely to survive. And it is a cult that crosses moot lines. It is one of the places where trolls from different clans from different moots can meet together in common cause. It appeared after the Scourge, and its power has been slowly growing, and its influence has been growing. Chorak, as with everybody else, hates them. They are blasphemous. Any members of the Forgiven that he finds among the Bloodlores are exiled.
Yes. So he hates the Forgiven of Jaspree, hates the other troll moots for being lesser than, because he does see them as lesser than trolls. He distrusts magicians because that's just being too sneaky, and you really ought to fight for things barehandedly, because like I said, he barehandedly crushes his opponents. But of all that hate, all that piss and vinegar he's full of, there's somebody he hates more than all of them combined, and that would be the Therans.
That would be the Therans. Yeah.
So he's just driving angry all the time.
And ultimately, that is the way that the Bloodlores would be brought in to any kind of alliance.
Yeah.
And Alliance is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that.
Partnership, I think, maybe.
Big ol' scare quotes around that one.
Yeah.
Okay, we're working together to go fight the Therans? Okay, I'm down with that.
Yeah.
You other trolls are strapping on your codpieces and going and actually doing what we should have done decades ago.
Yes.
We're down with that.
Yeah.
The Bloodlores worked with the other moots during the first Theran War when they went and beat the snot out of the Therans, and then went right back to their, and you all suck anyway.
Yes.
And looking for that again. But one of the aspects of the Forgiven that Chorak is especially ashamed of is that his brother is the ostensible leader of this cult. That is something that he keeps very secret because while he is a massive specimen of a troll.
Oh, yeah. He's the epitome.
Yeah. He's the Bane, and by that I mean like the DC Comics character who snapped Batman's back.
Yes.
He is the Bane of the Twilight Peaks. Just in terms of being a big, massive, physically imposing, strong troll, one of the highest circle Sky Raiders in the Peaks, and with all of the magic power that grants him, the ability to snap people's limbs like twigs. But he is also starting to get a little on in years.
Yes.
And as is the case with any kind of super orthodox society, any perceived weakness or way that you might be straying from that orthodoxy is an embarrassment, is a weakness, is something to be ashamed of and to hide. Yeah. The fact that his brother is the leader of this blasphemous cult, if that gets out, that is something that would weaken his stance among the Bloodlores and bring even more challenges to his authority. Speaking of challenges to his authority.
Prokkuav, Tornflesh, Firefang. Again, you gotta love these names. Questor of Raggok wants to usurp, speaking of usurper from the last episode, wants to usurp Chief Chorak, and he's a rank 8 Questor, by the way, so he's no slouch. He's not like playing and dabbling. He's freaking committed to Raggok. And as a 6th Circle Sky Raider, he's not quite the same as 9th Circle Chief Chorak, but, you know, he wants to be in charge because, well, Raggok is telling him to be in charge.
Yeah. He was injured by a Theran magician
Mm-hmm.
The magician cast earth darts and scarred him badly, took out one of his eyes, scarred his face and his arm, which is where he got the torn flesh moniker.
Exactly.
He replaced the lost eye with an astral sensitive eye.
Mm-hmm.
His path of devotion to Raggok started there because he swore an oath of vengeance against this elementalist.
Yeah.
And that got those initial hooks of Raggok's into him. That has gradually been expanded because he has yet to, at least as the time of this book is written, find the Theron that maimed him or that injured him. And so that vengeance, that hatred, that bitterness has been expanded by Raggok over time to encompass all Therons, and then by extension, those who are not doing everything they can to beat the snot out of the Therons, which from his point of view includes Chorak, because there have been times that he's wanted to go against the Therons, notably when the Triumph showed up.
Yeah.
Hey, another one's back. Let's go kick its ass. Yes. And Chorak was like, let's not be hasty.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because Chorak had a better read of the lay of the land at that point. But what do you know?
There is a strong, as opposed to some of the other moots that we've talked about, where there is duality, opposing viewpoints that are struggling in some cases. In this case, this is the young hothead who has challenged the chief in the past.
Yeah.
And not succeeded, but is itching for the opportunity to do it again and trying to build his power and build his support so that he can do that, and is being goaded into that by the passion of bitterness and vengeance. And so has a lot of power up his sleeve. And if he were to succeed and to take over, the Bloodlores are already vicious and nasty and violent. One where a high-ranking Questor of Raggok is in charge of the entire moot, that would increase the viciousness of the moot even more.
Yeah.
The Bloodlores are dangerous, and in one sense they are kind of villains, but there is enough cultural context here that they are not simple bad guys. They are just a very orthodox sect of the philosophy of the Crystal Raiders, with everything that results in. They are the only true ones, and everybody else is failing to live up to these ideals, to the point where they are afraid that they are not living up to their own ideals, and that is causing problems within that society.
Yeah. They're the dinosaur that just refuses to make any kind of progress whatsoever. They hold firm to these values. They will not change. They will not deviate from this path. End of story. And their entire mantra, put into words, is might makes right, period. Because they disdain ranged combat. They disdain magical combat. It should be up close and personal with your fists, maybe a weapon, whatever. It, as barbarous as it can possibly be.
If Chorak could get away with not having any magicians in the moot, he would do so. But he does need them to build and repair the airships. And that's about the only thing that they are good for in his eyes.
Yeah. Speaking of the airships, they only have 9 Drakars. They use forward catapults, side ballistas, and ramming spars. Again, only physical weapons. Period.
And they like ramming ships that they are attacking.
Oh, yeah.
They like getting up close and personal so that they can jump over the rail and start laying into the crew of their target vessel.
Yeah. Like a trireme, is that right? Am I thinking of the right vessel? Right word? Anyway, either way. But the entire Bloodlore Moot is made up of 25 clans, so they're still pretty large. And the last person of interest we need to talk about is Kolad Crystal Shaper Sword Cutter, the 10th Circle weaponsmith and highly skilled alchemist of the Bloodlore Moot.
Yep. There is a difference in the Bloodlore's eyes between blood charms and magic, spell magic that magicians do.
Yeah.
Kolad is tolerated because he's a weaponsmith. He makes the weapons that they fight with. He makes the blood charms that make them stronger. A lot of Sky Raiders that take part in raiding parties among the Bloodlores will have 1 or 2 blood charms that he has made. Blood Pebble armor is a high honor to have that. bestowed upon you by Kolad. He is a powerful individual, but, as his devotion to his craft is, he does not have the political
respect.
Well, he doesn't have a whole lot of political respect, but he doesn't have the political ambitions. He's interested in pursuing his craft, as is the case with a lot of weaponsmiths.
Yeah.
While in some cultures, a weaponsmith is seen as a linchpin or highly honored member of the society, that is not the case, because while he helps equip the warriors, he is not a raider himself.
Yeah. No, he just arms them. He's fine doing his little thing in his workshop. Leave me alone. Tell me what you need now, and I'll go make it for you. He's all good. So that leads us to the second and last moot of the Western Twilight Peaks, the Blackfangs. And in my head, I always hear there was a black flag. No, just kidding. The Blackfang Moot has been raiding into Carafad, by the way, and to the north and to the west. To the north, of course, means to the Bloodlore Moot. To the west is into the Dolores Mountains. We'll get to those guys later. But the Blackfang Moot, by the way, has also turned to mining through largely unskilled and low acumen mining. They don't really remember how to do it the right way from centuries ago, so they're rediscovering how to do it. So they're fumbling, but they're trying.
Yes.
Due to the rich deposits in the southern slopes, they have pursued magic as well, because where they are is kind of a hard scrabble existence, to Josh's point. But they have unrivaled inventiveness in creating airship enhancements, all magical, of course. And this is the first moot we've talked about where they really have adopted magic at the forefront and predominantly to be used in everything that they're doing.
And magic in the sense of elementalist magic, of spellcaster magic,
Yes.
as opposed to Sky Raider magic, because of course there is that as well.
Yeah.
But the Blackfangs of the past were so magically skilled that they actually had stone drakars. They were capable of making stone airships themselves, still modeled after the troll fashion, but they were the only ones capable of doing that. They also suffered pretty badly at the hands of the Therans at the Battle of Sky Point and lost a lot of the knowledge as a result of that. They still have 3 stone ships, but they don't know how to make any more. There is a long tradition of spellcastery, of magery, of magicians being significant, using those abilities to make things like lightning throwers and some of the more strange Crystal Raider weapons that you will come across
on a ship.
Amongst them on a ship.
Yeah.
It all ties back to one of the earliest and most famous Blackfangs.
Ilum
Blackfang, who was a nethermancer of significant power, and in fact was one of the earliest members of the Crystal Raider moots to start constructing cares. He was fascinated with magical lore and knowledge and did a lot of research and learned things and started building and preparing the Blackfangs for the coming scourge before anybody else was, and was just fascinated by and always looking for more magical knowledge, which led to his downfall.
Yes. Because, of course, he became horror corrupted, and
in the course of his desire to learn more magical knowledge, to become more powerful and more able to protect his people, horror, or horrors plural, offered him a deal where they would give him knowledge, and he accepted. And that eventually warped and twisted and corrupted him to the point where he started building weaknesses into some of the defenses of some of the cares that he was leading the construction of, to make them more vulnerable to the horrors so that they could crack them open more easily during the scourge.
Death Star much? Kidding.
This betrayal was discovered by his brother.
Brothers again,
who fought him and killed him.
Yeah.
And assumed leadership of the Moot and did everything he could to try and repair the damage or
repair the cares,
fix the sabotage that had been done on them to try and help his people through. Ilan was a member of the Order of Silver Twilight.
I was just going to bring that up. So I was saying his body or his spirit or his ghost, still inhabits that stronghold.
Well, the stronghold that his own personal stronghold that he had built, that's where the fight was with his brother. And he, whether through the assistance of the horrors or other things, his spirit still inhabits that. It is now his tomb.
Mm-hmm.
And so he is still there all these centuries later, trapped sort of in that location and trying to break free so that he can once again assume control of the Moot. This is the sort of almost like an Earthdawn equivalent of like a lich. The sort of the spellcaster who has, in the pursuit of the secrets of immortality or the mystical secrets or whatnot, has sort of extended their life, become a figure of evil. Now,
so kind of like Voldemort.
Ilan's betrayal has meant that Nethermancers are forbidden among the Blackfangs. Elementalists are highly prized. Some pursue wizardry, but Elementalists are the primary spellcaster magician class amongst the Blackfangs. And Nethermancers are forbidden. Anybody that is found to be practicing Nethermancy is either killed or exiled.
Yeah. Killed 98% of the time. Exiled, maybe if we like you somewhat, kinda doubtful. But yeah.
Nethermancers are not trusted, ultimately.
No, because Ilum kind of, started that whole thing off. So one down.
He salted that field.
Yeah, close that field up. So yeah, because Ilum is still, after death, still learning as a spirit more magic. So
he's been at it a long time.
A long time. But because of his involvement with the horrors is now completely malevolent. There is nothing redeemable there whatsoever. And basically is to be treated as a strength 5 ally spirit and a 13th circle Nethermancer.
Yeah. You add that high-powered Nethermancer casting ability on top of the spirit.
Yeah.
You've got something that is a pretty hefty challenge.
Potent.
That's a pretty potent combination.
Absolutely. But the leader of the Blackfang Moot is Drolan Irongrip Blackfang. He's the chieftain of all 15 clans. He's got 10 co-wives and 7 co-husbands and all kinds of their children left in there as well. Led by an 8th. He's the 8th Circle Sky Raider, so he's in charge at the moment. And the co-husband with him in the line marriage is Delos Earthshaker Blackfang.
Yeah, Drolak's primary concern is the survival of the Blackfangs. They're in a very difficult situation now with the return of Carafad.
Mm-hmm.
That territory, which had been an area that they had raided quite frequently and had been able to deal with, is now a lot stronger. And the orcs are not
easy victims.
And so that is making things more difficult for the Blackfangs. And it is leading thoughts of, we've got these resources. Maybe we should trade. Maybe we should make deals.
Yeah.
We are suffering because of this.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should do something different to survive and to ensure that, which is, of course, something that pisses off the Bloodlores.
Naturally. Because everything pisses off the Bloodlores.
That's his primary concern, that their traditional raiding territory is not so easily raided anymore. Mm-hmm. And there is a lot of knowledge, and there is sort of a forgotten golden era that is part of their culture.
Yeah.
Not one that is necessarily done in sort of a bad way, but it's just, we used to be able to do these things. We suffered greatly at the hands of the Therans and the betrayal of, what we thought was our greatest leader. And so we suffered as a result of the Scourge. We are in one of the most inhospitable areas of the Twilight Peaks.
Yeah. And so on and so on and so on.
Yeah. And so it's a difficult situation, but he is doing the best that he can.
And like a good leader, he's worried about the future of his troll moot. That's the first of the 6 that I've heard so far where he's really, really worried about the future of his troll moot. But there's
a wrinkle.
A small wrinkle. Yeah. His co-husband.
One of the co-husbands.
Of his 7. Delos Earthshaker Blackfang. Not only the 8th Circle Elementalist, but is secretly a 7th Circle Nethermancer. Dun dun dun. Whose ghost master is, wait for it, Ilum. Blackfang. You want more intrigue? This is a whole episode of this is a whole season of Game of Thrones right here. Intrigue, political backstabbing, and whatnot. So.
And Ilum's ultimate goal is to work things up to the point where he will be able to possess Delos's body.
Yeah.
And cast Delos's spirit out into the depths of wherever, because he don't give an F.
Nope.
But to take over that body and then to use his considerable knowledge, be able to leave his stronghold, his prison, and presumably with the significant amount of power that he has, take over the Blackfang Moot and wreak untold havoc, I would imagine, would be the end result of that. This is a classic fantasy situation.
Oh, yeah.
We've got a struggling culture. We've got a secret undead mastermind behind things trying to manipulate the situation to their own ends to escape. If you've got a campaign arc or a storyline that's going to be dealing with this, especially maybe a higher circle one that might be trying to put an end to Ilum, you've got this fortress stronghold tomb of this ancient and powerful Ghostmaster Nethermancer spirit.
Yeah.
The things that come to mind are like the classic dungeon crawls of yore, like Tomb of Horrors or White Plume Mountain, or things like that, where you've got this just nasty, dangerous, classic style dungeon crawl where the player characters will need to break through the no doubt significant magical defenses that have been erected over the centuries in this place, that while he may be trapped there, he is not going to make it easy for you to get into him.
No.
And try and put a stop to this entity, this malevolent, horror-corrupted spirit. Classic evil overlord. You uncover his plot and need to defeat him somehow to put an end to it.
This is ripe for a novel.
Yeah, this is like stereotypical fantasy kind of thing, just in the framework of everything else that's going on with the Blackfangs and the Crystal Raiders and everything else on top of that.
Yeah.
I had forgotten this aspect of it. When I was prepping and rereading it, I was like, oh yeah, these guys are awesome. I was initially starting and going, oh, they're the magical ones. Maybe, like, it would have been interesting maybe to retcon Virag's background to have her come from there. And I'm like, oh no, wait, they don't like Nethermancers. Never mind.
Exactly. Never mind.
I mean, potentially it could have been a, like, exile, whatever, but that never came to be.
Yeah.
They are fascinating. Broadly speaking, you've got a leader who is looking out for the best interests of his people and dealing with a hostile neighbor to the north and an inhospitable area and difficult choices to make.
By a husband.
All the while working in this is this secret evil overlord who has been lying to Delos about the truth of what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, my brother came and killed me because he was jealous of my position.
Yeah.
Here is the truth. There's a real, like, Emperor Palpatine kind of dark side. And a dual-disciplined elementalist Nethermancer is nobody to trifle with.
No,
because, of course, they'll have, in addition to their, no doubt, potent spell abilities, they will also have probably quite a number of spirits that they have worked out with and such over their career.
Totally. So the Blackfang Moot, as we've done with all the other moots, just so we know that their arsenal still exists, they do have 10 airships, 7 of which are the wooden traditional Drakars. To Josh's point, he said 3 are still made of volcanic rock, but can't make any new ones. But each of the volcanic rock Drakars that are aloft have a 5th Circle Elementalist on each of those stone ships. Not only to keep it afloat in case something happens, but to cast spells from in combat. So the Blackfangs can bring it if they need to, because the other weapons on board all of these ships are the Dragon's Breath, the Fire Sheath, the Spear Throwers, and the Thunderbolt Throwers. So they're not slouching off in the combat aspect. Don't sleep on the Blackfangs.
Yeah. The other bit about the stone airships of the Blackfangs is that one of the ways that they are able to fly is that they have an air spirit, an air elemental bound into them. And that in order to successfully pilot the ship, the captain needs to win a contest of wills against the spirit. And so right now, only 2 of those ships can fly because nobody has been able to best the spirit of the third one in order to have it take the air.
Yeah. Again, ripe for a novel.
Yeah.
I'll be working on that in my spare time with my free money. Just teasing. Yeah, no, the Blackfangs, like I said, don't sleep on the Blackfangs.
They're in a rough position. I think now, kind of having gone through all of these, I like all of the moots in their own ways.
Yes.
But the Blackfangs, I think, are probably my favorite.
Fair.
Just because of their situation and the story that kind of goes along there is just such kind of classic
fantasy tropes and drama.
Fantasy tropes and drama and whatnot.
It's a Shakespearean drama in the background.
Potentially, yeah.
Just, like Hamlet. It's just classic there. Anyway, so any further thoughts on on the 2 we just talked about today? The Bloodlores or the Blackfangs?
No, nothing comes to mind. I think we've covered everything pretty well.
No, I think we're good there. Covered almost a full hour, by the way. I think this is one of our best episodes yet. So until next time, folks, don't sleep on the Blackfang Moot for your legend.
Good night, everybody.